So it is a great segue. So first of all, my shout out to Vince. Thanks, Vince, for getting me into this stuff.
No problem.
The initial pieces of masking Vince did for me, and I said, well, what the hell? Let's get one. So I went out and bought one. And I'll talk to you about the opportunities that you guys can use. Now, just for the sake of keeping things moving, because I'm going to go through a PowerPoint, can we save the questions till after I finish? And then I'll come back to certain slides, okay? Now, what you're going to see is a PowerPoint, and embedded in that PowerPoint is going to be a video that I've got film editing software and screen capture software. The video will play that shows a live example of me creating some masks. So sit back, enjoy, turn up the volume, and I'll start right now, okay? So to save all the questions to the end, I'm just going to share. Hold on. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. This is totally aimed for newcomers to this. It is not aimed, Vince, it's not aimed at you because you know all this stuff already. It's aimed for the guys that have no knowledge of this stuff. So that's what IPMS Northeast New York wanted me to do. So I presented this presentation to them last week. I sent copies of this to Eric. He'll post it on the website through an autoplay that you just click on it. But anyways, I'm going to go through some narration. All right, so desktop cutting machines. That's the term I'm using right now, DCMs, and what they can do for scale modelers as an intro, okay? Now, what is a desktop cutting machine? I'm being very basic now. A desktop cutting machine is similar to a desktop printer, but instead of printing on paper, this thing is programmable to cut material and print it on a variety of thin materials like masking tape, like kabuki tape and Tamiya tape, cardstock, vinyl, fabric, even thin plastics, and we'll talk a bit about etching. It can even cut into leather. How can this be relevant for scale modelers? Well, the obvious one is markings. Numbers, letters, that's the first thing you can do with these things. Simple symbols like stars and bars. Camouflage patterns, you can use it for that. Canopy masks, very good for that. But it should never be confused with a decal printer. It's not a decal printer, like an Alps printer. So if you look at the picture right here, right, it's great for the A23. You can do the stars and bars, but it really is going to have a hard time doing this Sleepy Time Gal image right here. That's not what desktop cutting machines are for. Now, there's many popular brands today. Cameo Silhouette is what I have. There's Cricut, there's a US Cutter, and there's Roland. There's tons of brands out there. I would say that the top two here are the most common in terms of what I see modelers use, Cameo Silhouette and a Cricut. I have a Cameo 4, which is the latest model. I'll talk a bit about that. Okay, tips when you're buying them. Don't always wait for a sale. Don't buy retail. I got mine, by the way, I did Hobby Lobby and Sam's because I tailored this to the US audience. I got mine at Costco. I got it about 6 months ago on sale online. It's not in the stores. And I think by the time I applied the coupon, the whole printer cost me about $225 Canadian, which is not bad, right? And I'll tell you, it pays off in dividends, as you'll see. Look for ones that have deeper cutting capacity, more options for modeling. So deeper cutting means that you can not only cut into Tamiya tape, obviously, which is the lightest, but you can cut into thin plastics. And right now, the Cameo 4 has the deepest cutting blade of any of the other brands. Choose known brands that support software, that have updates. Some of them have designs that you can purchase, you can download. Okay, what are some of the requirements of the software? Glenn mentioned earlier he uses Corel. Well, there's many types of software that you use with these machines. Some of them are very advanced, Fusion 360, Photoshop, but they come in the box with the printers as well. And with the Cameo comes with its own software called Silhouette Studio, right? Some of these software are very costly. Other design software, you can get them for free. But realize that the more advanced the software, the more tools for editing and creating you have, but the learning curve is huge. Okay, Glenn mentioned he's been using CorelDRAW for years. I used to use CAD software because I was an urban planner. It's a big learning curve. So start with the software and the printer, and that's what I'm doing. Some software, such as Silhouette Studio that comes with the Cameo 4, can be upgraded. Now, I would suggest you do that. The software is free, but the upgrade to give you more tools is like $50. It's a one-time fee. And that gives you added tools and functions like a ruler and allows you to import SVG files.
Nice.
We'll talk about those in a minute. Other things that you're going to need when you're thinking about buying one of these, it's kind of like in any type of modeling tool, you need to have some consumables. Blades, you're going to need those, and I'll show you what those look like. Cutting mats, that's what you cut onto. There's going to be different blades for different effects and different materials. Some blades are included in the printer, some are not. You're going to need masking sheets. Obvious one is Tamiya, right? Oracle is a company that also makes masking sheets that you can cut onto for masks. And transfer tape, you're going to need that, and we'll talk a bit about what a transfer tape does. But in essence, it helps position delicate cut masks onto a surface. And Oracle and Silhouette make transfer tapes. Now, this is what they look like. Oh, you need a high-res scanner. I definitely use that all the time. I've got an old Epson V500. Make sure that if you have a scanner, it's high resolution, at least 300 DPI or higher. Anything lower than that, it's not useful. And these are what the blades for the Cameo 4 look like. Look like these cylindrical things. There's your blade right there. And these numbers are your cutting depth. You guys have seen a Tamiya, right? That's the most obvious one, masking sheets. Cutting mats, these are used, basically this goes on top of this and fed into the machine to give it some foundation and strength to cut onto. And that's the transfer tape, okay? Now, there are many different types of blades in order of relevancy, in my opinion. There's an auto blade, and that blade, you don't do any adjustments to it. You just put it in the machine and away it cuts. You can do some adjustments in the printer options, but aside, that's the one that I use all the time. There's this thing called a craft blade, and that's for deep cutting, useful for scratch building, such as scribing in 10 thou, 20 thou styrene sheet, right? You can use it for that. It doesn't cut through it. You etch into it, and then you break it. There's a pen holder that holds a small pen, so you can design and position patterns, like camo patterns first before cutting the pattern. And then a rotary blade, which is probably less relevant to modelers, but this is a rolling blade, useful for fabrics. And I'm thinking maybe you want to do a model display base with felt, perhaps. Not as useful, but these are the types of blades. It's not just one cutting blade. Now, some tips. Use the cutting blade designed for your cutter, so they're not interchangeable. You can't use a Cricut cutting blade in a Cameo, so you got to buy theirs. But you can use any type of cutting mat, transfer tape, and of course, you can use any type of masking sheets. Experiment reading in SVG files, PDF vector files. We're not going to get into the details of those. Maybe we can talk about them after. But they can read in many different types, and I'll give you an example of even reading in a very fuzzy PDF and how I managed to create some numbers for my 1/72 Tony. Save your masking sheets so you don't obviously print on one huge sheet and you throw it out. You can cut them, and you can also print them on bits and pieces of Tamiya tape as well, so you don't have to waste the whole sheet. I use Windows Paint for simple, fast image cropping because it comes with the machine. That's when you're surfing the web, you see something you like, then you just screen capture that, and I just use Windows Paint for that. Once you screen capture it, you save it as a JPEG, and then you read it into the software, and away you go to do your work with it. Don't throw out any decals, even those old ASCII decals, because I find, since I've now got one and experimenting, the easiest way is to scan your decal sheets. And I'll show you what you can do once you've scanned them in. Because remember, you're using them as masks. You don't care about the decals and how old they are, as long as they're clear, right? They do come in handy, so don't throw them out. The best masks are from high-res images, original decal sheets, SVG files. The best are ones where there's a darker image on a white background. Those are the best, okay? Cutting tips. Use the highest resolution images possible. Rely on your auto blade, mention that. But when you're setting up your printer, do set your cutting weight to 7 or 8 on a Cameo, because although it sounds technical, the higher the number, the deeper the cut. But then you don't always want to use a deep cut on Tamiya tape. You're just going to dull the blade, right? And there's an example I'll show you in the video. Save as many cutting designs on a page as you can to save on the masking sheet. So if you're going to print on a Tamiya sheet, do a whole bunch of, symbols and maps and numbers and things, and do them all on the sheet. The general how-to, and this is being really simple, in creating a mask is some general steps. The first thing is obviously you look for the image. You capture the image of what you want, and you can do a screen capture I mentioned before. You can take a decal sheet in your collection and scan it on your scanner. You can read in an SVG file directly. We'll talk about that at the end. Once you've read it into the software, you're ready to go. And then once it's in your software, you literally take that image, and I'll show you the example in the video. I won't go through it here. That you begin to take the cutter, clean it up, and you end up with the number you want. This prints out on the masking sheet, and away you go. That's the way you do it. Now, I'm just going to start with an autoplay video that I did before, and it'll take you through, it's about 3-4 minutes or something like that, of what I do to create a mask. Okay, so just, here we go.
Here's my Cameo 4 desktop cutting machine setup, running its Silhouette software on the monitor, as you can see. Right above the monitor is the printer itself. The Cameo 4, for display purposes, has its cutting mat, as you can see, which is the grid sheet that you see before you. And loaded in there for display purposes is a sheet of Tamiya masking sheet, kabuki tape. There's some more consumables I have within the vicinity. On the right is a roll of transfer tape, and on the left is another brand of masking sheet in a roll. It's vinyl, which also can be used in this machine. Over here is, most importantly, my high-res scanner. It's an older model that still does the trick. It's an Epson V500. There's probably more modern models out there. But one of the ways to create a mask is to scan your decal sheet with your scanner, transfer it into the computer, read it into the software, edit what you wish, and print the mask out on the printer. We're now in the Silhouette software itself, and I'm going to show you an example of the easiest way you can create a mask, in this case from a decal sheet. In many cases, the kit decals are really great, but there may be some of them, such as numbers, that you may wish to create a mask and spray them on instead of using the decals for fear of surrounding clear decal film silvering. In this example, I've previously scanned in a decal sheet. I'm going to read in that image into the software itself. And in this case, we're going to take this number, B341, and we're going to create a mask from that. All we have to do is use the trace tool in the software, and we highlight the area that we wish to create a mask and trace the outline. Once you remove that image, you can see that we now have a trace of that number ready to go to the printer. However, there may be some cases where the traced image has some anomalies in it, and we're going to fix those. And in this case, if we highlight this and maybe sharpen it and deepen it a bit, you can see that there are two anomalies in this image that need to be removed, this little dot and this little mark here. The software has many editing tools. In this case, this is a simple eraser, and you can erase it. You're now ready to go. This particular number is a very clean image and is ready to be sent to the masking sheet because the decal sheet was done on high-res scanner, and it's a very dark color, and the tracing feature in this tool made a very clean cut of that number. So this one's ready to go with only that minor cleanup that we had to do with those two little anomalies. But before we do that, if you wish, there are many other editing tools that would allow you to modify that number. I've copied it here in case you want two of these to be cut to the masking sheet. Maybe you want to change one of these numbers. The software has some erase tools, as I said before. Maybe you want to change that one, and you want to replace it with another number on the decal sheet, maybe this 0 here. And we'll trace that, move that sheet away so you can see it, and we can then highlight it and move it over, and it's ready to go. In another case, if you want to resize it, you can see when you select the trace, it gives you its dimensions vertically and horizontally. And if you know the dimensions of this number in another scale, you can enlarge it to perhaps create this number for a larger scale model based on this image right from the original decal sheet. There's many other ways that you can create and edit this, and we're not going to go through all the tools, but you can change some of these numbers here. If you double click here, you can see these dots. If you click and drag, you can see that you're literally changing the shape of that 4 by dragging these little lines. See? The one there and the one over here. It's a bit hard to see. There you go. We're not going to do that now because that doesn't look right, but it gives you an idea of the power of the editing tools that you can use before you send this off to the printer. In this example, I'm going to show you how to create a mask when you don't have a decal sheet, but you have an image. In this case, I want to create this number, which will be placed on the wheel doors of my Key 61 Tony in 72nd scale. It's pretty small, but this will give you an idea how powerful the software is. The final cut is what you see up here, the 57 number that you see up here. But how did I get there? Was by scanning in this image and then taking the trace tool, and you'll see that it's not a clean scan because it's taken from a very fuzzy image. If I highlight that, it will highlight all of the little weird lines and anomalies around that 57 as well. But it's not going to be a difficult task. It's just going to be time consuming. What you see here doesn't look very good and will require some time to clean up. But with the tools, you can then begin to take that image and you can begin to start cleaning it up. And I'm just erasing a lot of this extraneous lines that don't need to be there. And there may be some cases where you zoom in and you can see that there are some lines that need to be reconnected in the 5, some other ones that need to be cleaned up. This is really bad here. But without going through all that, this probably took me about an hour, maybe in a bit, and I shrunk this image down to 72nd scale, which you see up here. So I'm not going to go through all these changes, but you can see how some images which are fuzzy can still be read in, and they can still make for a nice clean cut where you do not have a decal sheet. We're now back to the example of printing this B341 number onto the masking sheet. In this case, we're at the printer menu of the Silhouette software. There's a lot of buttons here, but I want to show you one in particular. There's this little force button here that goes from setting of 1 all the way to 33. The higher the number, the higher the pressure cut or deeper the blade cut into the material. And this is because these machines can not only cut into Tamiya kabuki tape, it can also cut into thicker vinyl and can even cut into leather. But in this case, we're going to be sticking to cutting into Tamiya tape, and I have found that the best force pressure, in my experience, for cutting into Tamiya tape on this printer, it may vary in other printers, is a force setting of about 8. Now once I've set that, and that's ready to go with the number placed in the upper, you can move that around. This is placed in the upper left corner of the sheet. We'll send it to the printer, and you'll see how it actually prints out.
So here's the final result. You can see that I've cut the B341 cleanly into the kabuki tape, and it's ready to be placed on the model. The transfer sheet that you see, which is the transparent sheet with the light blue grid on it, is placed on top of it to help position that B341 number onto the model itself. If you don't have it, it'll be very difficult to get the placement of the numbers, including the little spaces in the B, the holes in the B, to align properly. And that's what this transfer tape is for. So all you do now is to remove the backing, leave the transfer tape on, and apply it to the model in the position you want. Once it's ready to go, you remove the transfer tape, and you're ready to use your airbrush and spray this number on the side of the fuselage or wherever you wish to put it. And that's about it. And we'll end right there, but there's a very quick example of creating a quick mask for these numbers for your model and avoiding a decal with the potential of silvering around these numbers.
Now I'm just going to go through a couple of examples so you can see some of the examples that I've put this printer to use. Well, thanks to Vince. I didn't do the Vince did this for me. This 172-5 is on my 148 Continental 7. John Wong did this on an Alps printer, so this is not from the desktop cutting machine, but this is. Once the mask was on, you can even see the dash here is 2 colors. You spray it, I think I started with the red, and then I just masked and did the black. So it's hard to see in this photo, but because it's sprayed on, there's absolutely no, obviously there's no decal film because it's not a decal. The second example is one that I'm working on for, now I'm not supposed to show this to you because it's for a book, but what the hell. This is an armor piece I'm working on, and I used it for the start recognition. That's an easy one. So I printed that out for the model. It is, I didn't want to use the decals because I didn't know how they'd react going over all these rivet details. And then there's going to be a lot of, when I weather my tanks, I use a lot of like toxic materials, and I didn't want that to affect the decals. Also, the tactical symbol on the turret was also from a desktop cutting machine. There's the 57 that you saw in the example. This is, I haven't even shown this to anybody. I just finished this, what, 2 weeks ago. This is a 172nd Tamiya Tony, Key 61. And I wanted to do this particular aircraft from the 244th Sentai, and I needed the number, so there you go.
Oh, wow.
Here's one I did for Darren Gall. He does, he builds German armor. And his project on this Brumbar was stalled for quite a number of years, in fact, until he asked me, well, can I do this dash 112? So he had a dash 120. I scanned that in, and I just obviously copied the 1 and made it into a 112, and he's back in business. Very happy with this, and so he's working back away at the Brumbar. This is how small this thing can get. This is a 72nd Panzer IV 162, and I used it to do the crosses because it's hard to see, but that's Zimrid. And there's no way I'm going to get a decal to go over that. So I use that thing's got to be what, just like 3 or 4 millimeters by, yeah, very tiny. But it works. The other example, now this is a older model that I scratch built. It's a 135th Japanese engineering vehicle. Now I did it the old school, right? Just look at the plans, kind of draw them out, cut them out. But I did experiment, and I managed to create this, which probably took me, you know, 3-4 days to do. And it did the etching in this in like what, half an hour? So that's when you can use it. It's not going to do all these wheels and shit. That's a 3D print, okay? But it certainly will do the rest of it. That's my 148 Caproni 133. And again, some of these decals were horrible, and I had to literally, I think I did the, I did this one, I think. Like, these were the kit decals, and I did this off the printer because they broke up. My 148 111 Henkel Pedro. There's no way I wanted to use the kit decals, the old cutting edge decals. They were like 15 years old, and I also used it for the pattern. Right, I scanned into pattern, and then I cut out the patterns, and that's how I got accurate dimensions for the patterns. Now, there's one group on Facebook. It's called the Cutting Edge Scale Modeling Plotter Cutter Users Group. You go on there, there's guys that not only talk about these tips, but they actually upload their designs that you can download. And you go there, and like, you have to sign in, you have to join. They'll let you join. And if you take a design from them, for example, I'm playing around with some numbers for a Raiden, a Japanese Raiden fighter. Some guy's already done all the numerals for them. So you don't have to do them, you just download them. And they're already in the format that go right into your software and away you go. So that's something that you can use as well as a resource. So I'm going to stop right there. And the only thing that I didn't talk about was Canopies, because when I do these things, I'm too close to it. This thing is fabulous for doing canopy masks. My Sally, which I forgot to include in the presentation, I use the MPM masking set for the canopies, but I only have one, and they're long gone. So what you do is when you use up your canopy mask, scan that into the machine. And then you basically use the cutter to cut your canopy mask. It's fabulous for that. So if you want to build all of the Spitfires from Malta or something, you just need one masking sheet. Don't tell Everett that. And you just cut them yourself. Especially some of the new kits coming out on the market. I know that the 148 Tamiya Tony has a canopy mask in the kit, but they don't cut it for you. They just print it on paper. So you scan that in, you cut it on your machine, right? You don't have, right?
Sorry, Harvey, just to pick up on some of the things, if you recall on that Z1007, the masking set that you had was for 72nd scale.
Correct.
So I scanned it, and we did it at 2 or 3 different sizes because the 72nd to 48th scale match 2 different vendors. They're going to be a little bit different, but and that's another way, going back to what Harvey was saying about.
And I wanted to thank you, Vince, for all that work.
No problem, Harvey. Anytime. The fact is, you can go from one size to another, but it's interesting that you bring up the thing about manufacturers, because I started a bit of a little flame war on the Edward group, where I said, shouldn't vendors just provide the SVG file? That way I can just cut it out. And people said, oh, they're gonna go out of business. And I'm thinking, really? They're gonna go out of business? Because I mean, you're gonna save money by not having to ship tape material with the kit. Just download it, for crying out loud. But anyway.
Controversial, that is.
Excellent presentation. If I may, I'm going to throw in a few things. Cricut just announced a new product. I have no idea. I'm assuming it's bigger, faster, better. It's got more schlong material there, whatever it is that it does. You may want to look into it. Go to YouTube, latest Cricut product. The Tamiya masking sheets, if you can, find the one that has the grid printed on it, because that'll help, like Harvey said, with aligning. If you're going to use Tamiya tape by itself, not the Tamiya sheet that has its own backing sheet, what you do is you take the mat that Harvey was showing, flip it over, because that part of the mat has no stickiness to it. You put your tape down on that, feed that through the machine, and then you peel it off. And you can go from there. Whereas if you're going to use, because these cutting mats have to hold paper, or like Harvey said, felt, or cardstock, if you're making birthday cards or whatever, they have a stickiness to them. And different mats will have like a light stick, medium stick, a heavy stick, depending on what you're putting down. But that's another way to use it in an inverted mode. But, the sky's the limit, quite literally, how you want to use these things.
Well,
they're fantastic.
Just to the controversy, though, I'm in no way suggesting that, you go and just surf the web you try to support the manufacturers.
Of course.
But there are cases where a certain marking may not exist, or a decal sheet might be long gone and out of production.
Yeah,
that's when you can do that. Get the best scan you can, and then away you go. It can do some complex stuff like Sentai markings. So just play around with it. Any questions?
You guys were on about having the file. I've recently bought some wooden model boat kits of boats for ships, and you get a PDF for free. And when the kit comes to you, there's no instructions, there's no nothing. It's just the kit, bare bones, all the parts you need. But the instructions I took off the internet from the company that supplies the kit.
Okay.
And it saves them all the paperwork. It also means that I don't get the instructions folded up and bent. It's all flat and nice to work with. And of course, the kit's in a smaller box anyway. But I thought it was interesting that they've switched to this model already.
Yeah, quite a few have, yes.
Yeah.
Any questions from anybody?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Harvey, hey, and about that DCM, I never used it before. I heard about it, but thank you for sharing. I just have one comment about that software. I'm not sure about what software it is, but it looks like it's a vector-based, which means that you can actually use Adobe Illustrator.
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
Corel
Inkscape.
Draw.
Yes, you can, Anthony. Yes.
Yeah.
Vector-based stuff, Anthony, you should be able to use with that. I mean, even I know that people like we keep throwing around Photoshop, and I know Illustrator is the other option for vector-based stuff. But I mean, Photoshop as well for just general things.
Right.
Online, there is a free. I say free. It is a open source, quote unquote Photoshop program called PEA, and basically if you know your Photoshop software, you don't have to have Photoshop. You can use that. It's
Cheaper
strictly,
version.
yeah, it's strictly web-based. It's a web-based software, right? But even Photoshop now, you don't quote unquote own the software. You have to go through Adobe, and basically it's like a rental.
Right.
You know, similarly to Illustrator. You know, but if you know these types of software, it's not difficult to use it. So I can imagine seeing this type of presentation, Harv, and what can be done. I also imagine things like, for example, when it comes to things like weathering the actual vehicle or the aircraft, it makes it a lot easier because now you're actually weathering the actual paint itself.
That's it.
and not the decal that is on top of the paint.
Exactly.
Right. So
Yeah, just like on my Burma Lee you saw with the recognition star.
mhm.
It's come a long way now, but there's like 12 layers of weathering on that thing, and it's just way better. You're right. It's plus decals. They have a sheen to them when you put them on, and when you're especially with armor, it may work for aircraft, but with armor, you know, it just gets in the way of some of the effective weathering techniques, right?
Well, definitely with that M3, with that Lee, I could imagine it being an issue because especially with the angle,
Yep.
And not to mention the rivets, right? But the angle itself, you know, trying to keep it flat and to soften it enough so that it would get down,
Yep.
right to the level. This is something that like I said, it's good to see. Again, this is a type of technology, so I guess the only thing I would wonder is if you were to enter this into competition, is that considered, like, for example, say you were doing an out-of-box build, would that still be considered out-of-box if you did the same?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yes,
All
it
right.
would, because out of box only pertains to actual structural work according to the IPMS rules. You can use any markings you can, and that would therefore include the desktop cutting machine. So that's not a problem. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it gives
There
you
you
a bit
go.
gives you a bit of an advantage.
Tony
right?
Bell. Yeah, Tony Bell has been using a plotter since like 2013, 2014.
Mhm.
So-
Although Tony admits he hasn't used it in a while to make
Really?
markings. He's had the printer, but he hasn't used. I'm just saying. I know Tony for almost 30 years. He hasn't actually used it for markings extensively. He will soon.
If
Because basically I was gonna ask about that the Tamiya sheets, because one of the things I did at Hornet Hobbies back in 2014, we did we were supposed to do, it's still in a box and everything, but it was like a little, you know, seminar course, and at the end of the course he gave us basically like a latex whatever sheet, but it was
very nice.
it was like a roll. It was like a roll of stuff that
Yeah.
he was
Vinyl.
using in his.
Yeah, vinyl. Yeah. Very nice. Yep.
Is that the same thing, or are the
The
Tamiya
same,
sheets
same
better?
thing. Same thing.
Well-
Vinyl roll to me, it's the vinyl rolls are probably cheaper, but
Okay,
it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
The if you're having a hard time convincing yourself to buy Adobe Illustrator, and it's not cheap, a popular open source alternative is Inkscape, all one word. It allows you to draw. I downloaded it years ago. I think I've used it maybe a few times. Can't stand it personally. It's because I haven't really learned it. In fact, when I did the numbers for Harvey, you guys are gonna just laugh. And I ended up using SketchUp, which is a 3D tool, but I used it in like a 2D drawing tool for tracing, because we went from this profile, and try as I might to try to get rid of all the camouflage in the background. Maybe you know what? I didn't use the Cricut tool. I used some other tooling to trying to clean it up. After about half an hour of trying, I gave up and I said, you know what? I'm just going to trace the numbers. So I digitally traced them. And it's interesting. Harvey and I chatted about this once, and I said, you know what, Harv? Maybe the idea to take it old school. Where's Jonathan? Jonathan's going to love this idea. I said, let's just print out the damn profile, get a magic marker, and really darken up the numbers. Get like a whiteout pen or something, white out as much of the surrounding, and then just scan that.
Yeah, you could do that.
Which is kind of a combination of like something from Jonathan Evans's century.
Yeah. Well,
to,
right now that was for a one, which I'm working on right now. It's a 148, the Key 55 Ida. And for you aircraft aficionados, you go, where the hell did you get a 148? There's no kit. Well, there is. It's an old gull wings Japanese vacuform.
Oh wow!
And I need to do the Sentai markings. You know, they're quite complicated. So that's where we were talking with Vince about that. But now I've loaded. I'm playing around with it in the Silhouette. For right now, honestly, guys, start with the software and the print. Don't get fancy.
I know.
The more fancy you get, the more you'll get put off. Just use the software that comes with the machine and get going and just to do some numbers.
Harvey, did you get those?
All these advanced stuff, you're gonna get lost.
Did you find those 70-second scale decals finally arrive?
No.
Okay.
Oh, they're held in Japan right now because of the.
Okay.
I would have.
I
Sorry,
can,
go ahead.
I can actually make your life easier. I happen to be pretty comfortable in using vector software. So I use it to create my own decal sheets.
Awesome.
For the model club in Japan. But this is what I've done before. Just strictly using Illustrator.
Wow.
That's
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're not worthy.
So,
We are not worthy.
Now the Fat Albert, which is the Hercules, right? It is only available in 70-second scale, but
Right.
48 scale. So I did it complete drawing.
But what did you?
That's
Now,
it.
what did you-
Stamp collecting. Here I come.
But what did you print it on, Anthony? How did you print it?
Oh, okay. Long story. Okay, I designed it using Illustrator,
Right.
and I sent it off to a printer who can specialize in doing decal sheets.
I see. Right.
Yeah, it's a low volume production, so it
Yeah.
cost me sky fortune. But
All right.
the idea is, remember that you showed us about the 57?
Yeah.
So I can actually do it in just a few minutes. So if you guys have any fussy image or they have a hard time to reproduce, just send it over to me and I can help. I'm more than happy to help.
Yeah, and I was going to say roughly, Anthony, what you were just suggesting was the fact that if you do know the software,
Right.
adjusting things in vector after you get it into the vector. So especially things like specific fonts that may not exist, or
Right.
because a lot of these, don't forget, a lot of, especially World War II stuff, a lot of this stuff was hand painted on.
Yes. Right.
Right. So a lot of it is just like, okay, just adjust the different, the angle, the weight, the angle of the shape, and that can be easily done in vector software.
Exactly,
And
right.
I think it's
Usually
good,
you
right?
do
Do it
it
in a couple minutes,
I
too.
mean,
Yeah.
no matter how big you magnify it, you zoom in, you enlarge it, and you won't degrade the
Correct.
quality of the
Yeah.
image.
Yeah, just so you guys know in layman's terms, right? I was showing you a rough PDF because most guys don't know the technology and they're going to use that. What we're
Sure.
talking about is reading in a vector file proper, so you get all the proper dimensions and meameasurements. But
Yeah.
I think you guys need to know that there are both ways of doing it.
Harvey,
The SVG
Harvey, the other-
format is way better, but a lot of guys don't have that complex knowledge. So just be aware that there's a variety of options.
There's different ways of doing it. Definitely.
Guys, the other day I had a friend of mine ask me for one of the maple leaves on a Canadian ship, the old version.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, hang on, and I have a plan. It was 1-to-1 scale, which means it was basically 2 feet by 2 feet roughly. And I took a shot of it with a cell phone and realized it wasn't great. Cleaned off my drafting board, took an ink pen and a bunch of French curves, retraced it, photographed it again, and then he scaled it to what he needed.
Right.
Well
But
done.
it was
Nice.
hysterical.
Wait,
It was hysterical because I have many sets of French curves. I have many different kinds of ink pens.
Yeah.
The
And I said,
last
"Look,
time,
old
Jonathan,
school."
the last time I saw a French curve, I was in Montreal.
What was her name? What was her name?
Club Super Sex.
Dance
Oh, you mean
contact.
this? Which I just happen to have in my drawer right here.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
man.
Anthony, are those
Yeah.
decals silk screened or are they printed?
Still screen. Yeah.
They're
Oh.
beautiful.
Okay,
Those are beautiful.
So are you going to
But
tell us
again,
who this
guys-
low volume printer is?
Guys, realize that Anthony's work of art there is printing on decal film, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not with this technology, okay?
Right.
You
Understood.
need a special
However-
decal printer, just so you guys know, because otherwise you're going to get confused where you can do that. No, you can't do it on this printer.
However, here's the really cool part. Anthony, hold up your sheet. You got your sheet.
The edge of that.
Now that's one solid decal film, correct?
Okay, just a second.
That's one solid decal film. Watch where
I
I'm
hear.
going with this.
I know where you're going with this. I
Yeah,
know
the
where you're going.
madness.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just one solid decal film, correct?
Yeah.
So now you've got the artwork expanded by maybe 5% or 4% or 3%.
Sorry.
Feed that through the beastie, the cutter, and it'll cut the decals out for you with just
Yeah, you could do
ever
that.
so slight film around them.
You could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Yep,
is.
that's
I
how you
think like,
recreate it. Yep.
like
So-
that is. That
Just
is.
don't screw it up at $100 a sheet.
No shit. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And-
That is beautiful work, and I think that's.
Oh, it's
that's
brilliant.
Oh, by the way, if you guys need it, I still have a few more. So
So,
Does,
I can give them out free.
does
no charge.
anybody remember Hubert Moracuti?
yes,
Way back in the day, he had a
well,
company called
he was in the
Horizon
hobby, but I
Conversions.
never saw him build anything.
He did Horizon Conversions, and he
I know
did
a
a
few people
back
like that.
form MiG-15 in 32nd scale, and he hired Microscale to do the decal sheet
Right.
for the kit because it was a
Hori-
full kit.
Horizon was out of the U.S., right, Vince?
No, he was out of
No.
Mississauga.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I was talking to Hubert once, and I said, "Hey, how's that MiG-15 kit selling?" He goes, "Selling. You need decal sheets. You can wallpaper a room. I've got so many because the minimum order from Microscale was like 500 sheets or something.
Yeah.
I had to get all the. Oh, it was a
And
nightmare.
you know,
Sorry.
while we're on the topic, the only decal printing machine that I still know that's out there that's any half decent is the Alps one, which John
Yes.
Wall has.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
There's no others. So Anthony,
Well,
you have to go to somebody to do it for you. I just want to make sure that's clear to you. Again, it's not going to come out on a DCM printer.
No, Glenn, you had a question, or are you going to make comments though?
Any questions?
oh. No, sorry. It's been answered in the discussion since I put my hand up.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
I've got a question still.
Go, Matt.
The what is the level of detail of the cuts? Because I saw that some of the decals or the masks you had periods. You removed those tiny little dots and the numbers. And the decal sheet that you first showed that had the B341 had this little white dragon with like a curly tail and whatever. Would it be able to cut out that dragon, for example?
Well, I've experimented a lot with this machine. I would say the answer is yes, as long as your design is crystal clear, like, you know, white, dark background, white background. I have used this to cut small periods. You saw the cross on the 72nd Armor. So I'll just say it, guys. When I buy stuff, I actually experiment and use it. I've created upwards of 10 to 15 pieces of artwork on this, going right down to 72nd scale. Just make sure you got a sharp blade. But yes, Matt, you can do. Now, does it cut a perfect circle? It's a bit rough. But then again, remember somebody said those are usually done by hand on aircraft anyways. That 112 that I did for Darren's Brumbar, when I scanned it in, it did need quite a bit of cleanup, and I had to zoom right in to do it. But by the time I got that, it worked out. So yes, it can cut quite detailed.
Harvey, I got an idea for you. You know, for all the aircraft that have invasion stripes and 72nd scale, 48, whatever, they're all beautifully done with crystal sharp edges. But then you'll get the period photographs, you know, and they're just using paintbrushes and they're messy as crap. I wonder how well it would sell if somebody creates a set of, you know, slightly hand-painted looking masking for doing the invasion stripes, where everything is not uniform and the edges aren't completely straight and parallel. I wonder how that would go.
Well, why don't I wasn't going to do this, but why don't I show you? I haven't shown this. I was going to show this next month, but I did do this on my Tony Key 61, which has defense stripes on it. So why don't you? It's only going to take a minute. Let me.
Yeah, go ahead, Harvey. You have the ability to share your screen.
While you're finding it, Harvey, guys, Glenn, one of the things about the invasion stripes is I've seen them hand painted that look atrocious, and I've seen them hand painted by guys that were probably sign printers in their old days before they joined the forces. I think the range of quality is unbelievable on aircraft.
Sure, but wouldn't it be nice to have masks that could replicate? Like anybody can take a piece of Tamiya tape and stretch it tight so it's perfectly crisp and straight. But wouldn't it be nice to have things that are slightly
just a little bit,
just a little bit edges?
You know what though, Glenn? Here's the problem. You put it on the table, then you have to go and explain, unless you've got a photograph, because our eyes are kind of think in terms of, well, shouldn't those lines, why aren't those lines straight?
Okay,
so
I'm ready.
you'd have to back it up with a photograph.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen for a sec, okay?
Go ahead.
All right, you see that?
Harvey Lowe, yes.
Okay, so 240 North Sentai, all of these markings, defense bands, were all uneven. The Hinamarus were uneven. It's hard to see in this photo, but these stripes are all weird. And now this, I didn't do on the cutter. All I did was take a metal straight edge and I tore the Tamiya tape. I just manually tore it. So that way, when you spray it, you get this awkward, weird. It doesn't show in the photo, but it's very rough. And that's just an easy way that I did to replicate that. Now it's hard to see in these photos, but it's pretty jagged, especially around the fuselage right there. Okay, and this is 72nd scale.
Yeah, and you'd expect that because of the fact that a lot of this stuff was applied in the field, etc.
Yeah, and they were kind of losing the war too.
Right. So. Yeah, it's just like. Right. Sorry, Victor, you had. Yeah, Victor, you had a question, right?
Yeah, we're talking about the stripes, right?
Yeah.
So are you talking about 44 D-Day, Korea War, or the Suez Canal crisis?
Well, I think these guys were referring to D-Day stripes, but the same notion applies, right? Whether you're talking about the fence band stripes, they were not cleanly applied in many cases. And that's what I'm saying, that there are ways of doing it. Right?
One more question from me. Harvey, on that, oh God, I can't remember if it was the Brumbar, but, or no, it was basically something that was Zimmered, 172 Zimmered, where you put cross on. How did you deal with putting the mask on and not getting sort of underspray in the Zimmerit? Did you put like putty around it?
No, just kept pushing it down and using light coats of paint that wasn't too watery, otherwise it will seep under. And that's it. And it worked out fine.
One of the advantages of a tape mask versus using a photo etch mask.
Right.
Right. With a photo etch mask, you're never going to be able to press it down. And photo etch masks, you know, they've been around for a long time as well. And it's a great idea, but you know, trying to get into that Zimmerit, you're not going to do that.
But if you're going to get the whole suite of products, guys, obviously a decal printer, that would be great. Get one of these guys, get a 3D printer, get a vacuum form machine. Get those 4 things, and you got the whole world under your thumb.
And learn how to use Illustrator or CorelDRAW.
And use the Illustrator and CorelDRAW, you bet. Right?
Or hire Anthony.
No kidding. It's interesting. I mean, how far things have come. I mean, Harvey, you and I are about the same age, even though you're far more experienced with this than I am. And Vince, I know you're a few years older than I am, but it's like when you look back at stuff that, you know, just even like 30 years ago, right? And you think like, oh, well, you know what, we're still doing things with decals, or you know, now we have an Alps printer that we could print stuff on. And now you're looking at stuff where that is just completely changing the game, whether it's 3D printing, whether it's, you know, online CAD, whether it's DCM stuff. It just seems like it's changing things around for the better. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying
it's just because some sci-fi twit created the replicator, and we still haven't made it yet.
Jonathan, I'm still waiting for my jetpack and flying.
Yeah.
Like,
Vince, have you seen the military version that they've got?
Yeah,
like the Avro car from the 1950s.
No, the Royal Marines were testing one for doing checking of ships, you know, that are in.
I saw that. I saw that video.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Yeah, the Japanese have one, but it kept crashing into boats. Anyway,
Was his name Buck Rogers by chance?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you know, getting back to that last statement, right? Don't forget, guys. Even weathering products, right? You've got all sorts of different colors and products now, from MIG to AK to Wilder. The biggest question I have from guys when they ask is, well, which ones do you use? Remember, you can have the best decal sheet, the best printer, the best whatever, best vacuum form machine. It's still you, right? These machines will not make a good model. The good model is made by you. And the only way that you're going to get there is to use these tools a lot and practice, right? Nothing will solve and win you a master's level competition with just tools. The pen is a pen. The way you write with it is you. And I just wanted to say that to emphasize that these machines are not going to solve it, right? They're going to help, but it's you.